S09E11. Welcome to the Creation Gospel. We are continuing the Creation Gospel series, The Spirit-Filled Family. I hope you've been enjoying this section that we've been doing on the role of the husband within the marriage, within the home. Mostly we've been focusing on the role within the marriage itself, because when we do the children's section, quite a bit of that section will have to do with how the parents interact with the child, allowing the Spirit to move through that relationship and so forth. So on this particular section, obviously we're going to spend a lot more time dealing with the role of the husband in relation to his wife and his position as the leader of his home. And so in the last program, we wrapped up a little bit one of our foundational scriptures from the Torah that we've been working with. Obviously, we've been working with a couple of them. The first one, Exodus 24:10, because it really is foundational even to Jewish law in relation to marriage. We call them the three irreducible obligations of a husband toward his wife. In other words, in these three areas, he can never do less. He can never withdraw. And so, even in the making of marriage covenants in ancient times, a lot of times the way the ketubah or the marriage agreement was written was so that the agreement was made that the husband, when he took this wife, would agree to never reduce what she was already receiving from her father. When her father wanted to make a good marriage for her, that was actually written into the agreement, that she would, as they say down south, be maintained in the manner to which she was accustomed. And so we can see there again the value that the Torah places upon women, upon their daughters as they enter into the marriage covenant. And the Torah itself teaches this value and this importance of daughters and of wives as they move from that status from their father's house of daughter into that status of wife. Now, interestingly, when we give an age in Hebrew, we don't say, I'm this many years old, the way that we do in English. In Hebrew, it's ben or bat. For instance, ani bat, and then you would give the actual age. And I'm not giving you my age, but you can fill in the blank. And what that literally means is, I am a daughter this much in terms of number. We're not even using years to tell or give a value to the number of years that we've been on this earth. We simply say, I am a daughter, this number. Or if you're a son, you say, ani ben, and then you fill in the number of years. In other words, no matter how long your life or how short your life, the duration of your life, you will always be a son or a daughter. There are other relationships that you may not hold in your lifetime. You may never be married. You may never have children. There may be other relationships that you will not have, but nevertheless, once you're born into this world, you are either a son or a daughter. And so that's how a person's age is measured in Hebrew, is the number of years that you have been a son or a daughter. And so there's the idea there that when the parents help arrange that marriage covenant for their daughter, that she will never cease to be their daughter. She will always be their daughter. And as she moves into her husband's home, that they will continue to care about her well-being, except the primary responsibility for her well-being is now being transferred over to her husband. But that concern for her welfare never stops. And you can see the expectation, say if you read in the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, that if something happens so that a woman is widowed, that she returns to her father's house where she can be cared for and so forth, because we have the instructions concerning a daughter eating the holy things from the temple sacrifices. So there's an expectation there that family relationships within Israel will always be strong, that even though one is married, she is still a daughter, or even he is still a son. He never ceases to be a son. And family relationships are so important that they are measured that way. So understanding how important it is to build that family, what we realize is we instill values within that child as a son or a daughter, understanding that those values we instill into them from the Torah will be transferred and elevated as they move through their married life, because they will in turn pass that heritage on to their children. So that's why we instill in children at a young age that Yirat Adonai, or the reverence of Adonai. And the way we lay that foundation is teaching them to respect father and mother, so that they will learn that boundary of respect and the need for respect, so that they will begin to discern that there is someone outside of myself that I need to take into account, that I need to accommodate. And by learning to accommodate and flex to the demands of their parents, in turn, as they grow older, they will also learn to flex and to begin to accommodate the needs of other people in their lives, their families, extended families, fellowship, eventually workplace, and marriage. That's a skill that can be carried on into the marriage. Then when we look at the newlywed commandments, if we want to call them that, from Exodus 24:10 and then from Deuteronomy, where a young man is commanded to stay home for 1 year, 365 days after he's married, and to make his wife happy, and to learn what it is that makes her happy. You know, it's impossible to make someone happy if you don't learn how, because not the same things make everyone happy. What makes me happy might bore you to death. On the other hand, what makes you happy, I may not care for that at all. I may really not see the value of it. And so that's why it's important to take that happy year and earn that degree in my wife's happiness, so that the husband actually knows what it takes to bring her joy into the home, because that joy is truly going to blossom and bloom into some beautiful things as she builds his house and she builds his reputation. So it's a critical skill for him to learn how to make her happy. Now, just to save you some time, if you're thinking about getting married, or if maybe you skipped that happy year and you would like to back up and you would like to obey that commandment and apply it to your marriage so that you can learn better how to make your wife happy, so that these blessings that are stored up for you, that it talks about ready to be released when you find that good wife, you can learn how to tap into that. Remember, it's like that bank account, and if it's up there and you're not allowing your wife to come into agreement with you and to bring that peace into your home, then it's just like have millions and billions of dollars that it's there in your name, but you're not withdrawing. You're not using that account. But as you learn how to make her happy, obviously she's going to be a better wife. The happier we are, the better we are. The better results we're going to see in terms of the relationship. So to give you a little shortcut, remember, not all women are the same, just the way that all men are not the same. It's different things that make us happy. And truly, we're artificially dividing the role of the male and the female, or the husband and the wife, because there are things that pertain to a husband and things that are unique to the wife. But very often, there are things that are neither male nor female. They're simply personality types. They're simply preferences. And if you think about the biology and the chemistry and so forth of how human beings are created, even in that part of our makeup, there are going to be male hormones within a female and what we would call female hormones within the male. It's not 100%. It's actually the degree of the number of those hormones, the percentage of those hormones that's actually going to impact whether, in the uterus, whether you're going to become male or female. So it's not that the female has no male hormones or that the male has no female hormones. It's simply to a lesser degree. So there will be characteristics that identify the male and the female, but we can't say that every male is going to have this characteristic or every female is going to have this characteristic in terms of gifts, abilities, personality types, and so forth. So we want to be really careful, just like, let's say we're talking about who keeps the checkbook in a marriage. Well, if the husband is gifted in accounting and numbers and budgeting, and he's very organized and he has those skills, then that would be an area where he's gifted, but it's not necessarily a male responsibility within the marriage. If, on the other hand, you can see that the wife has lots of gifts and abilities in terms of budgeting and administration of the household funds and so forth, if that's her gift, and she's very organized and she's very good at it, that doesn't make it a female role within the marriage. It's simply assigned based on the gift. So we don't want to artificially assign certain things, certain activities, certain assignments within the marriage and say this is a male responsibility and this is a female responsibility. Because what you're going to see in Scripture is sometimes males cook. That's what Lot did. He made matzah for the angels that came to visit. All right? But sometimes the females cooked. There was part of the meal that Abraham has a part in preparing for the angels, and there's a part of it that Sarah, she takes a hand in preparing that meal. So cooking is neither a male nor a female responsibility. It's who is gifted, sometimes who has the better opportunity in the day. So that's one of those decisions you come at through agreement, through having that dialogue and recognizing the gifts or the abilities, or sometimes just the simple opportunity on the part of the other person. Sometimes work schedules or school schedules affect who's able to prepare the meals, who's able to do the grocery shopping. There is no male or female grocery shopping. It's simply who has the time, the ability, and the opportunity to do that. So getting caught up in male versus female in terms of our responsibilities within the marriage, that can be counterproductive because you may end up trying to fulfill a role that you're really not gifted in. And there's a principle basically that says there's a well inside every one of us. There's something we would call a gift, a spiritual gift. And we know that Adonai, he gives to his children good gifts from above. What does it say? Every good gift and every perfect gift comes from above. It comes down from the Father of lights, in whom is no variableness, nor shadow of turning. And so when he gives you a gift, that gift is without repentance. Now, can you forfeit the gift by your behavior? Sure. But he has put a wellspring within each of us that we'll just call it that gift. And what's going to come out of that wellspring are your talents, the things that you're good at, your skills. And typically, other people already know what those gifts are in you because it's so much a part of who you are. And so what you do is you cultivate those skills and those abilities that just spring naturally out of that well. It's not something that you have to work too hard at. It just comes naturally, and typically you're going to enjoy it because it feels natural, because it's coming from a spiritual source and not just the source of the nefesh, the source of the soul, which is very shallow, very variable. I mean, that's exactly the definition, basically, of our soul urges, is that they vary. They're very variable. The gifts that come down from the Father of Lights, it says there's no variableness. Once He gives that gift, it's spiritual, it's fixed. And then what we want to happen is for that well to spring up in you, and it can flow through the nefesh. It can flow through your soul. And then your soul can begin to accommodate something coming from a spiritual source. And then the body will respond to the nefesh, obviously. And then your hands and your feet and your brain, your intellect, all these things will start to work together in order to cultivate that spiritual gift that's flowing out of you. Now, there's nothing more frustrating than having that spiritual gift, but having a person in your life that's constantly trying to stop it up and stop the flow of it. And in the last program, where we talked a little bit about the contentious woman or the nagging woman or the dripping woman, it was pretty clear from the context of those passages that what was happening is a wife in this parable is reacting to the wickedness on the part of her husband, to some spiritual failure on the part of her husband. And she cannot allow that well of her own to flow properly when his well is not flowing properly. And what they'll end up doing basically is stopping up or impairing the other person's productiveness. So a lot of times opening up the well is simply recognizing, I know what people around me are telling me, but what I really hear from the Spirit is this. Now, sometimes the fact that everybody around you is telling you something and you refuse to see it, sometimes that's a good indication that you're in denial as to what the truth actually is. If everybody around you is speaking the same problem into your life, you really have to self-evaluate. But every now and then, no matter what everyone around you is saying, you're going to know the truth of the Spirit inside of you because it's springing out of that spiritual source, out of that well. And basically, it's asking you to defy the odds in spite of what you see around you. And so when somebody is stopping up that well in your life, if you have a gift and you're married and that partner has a habit of stopping up the well where that spiritual water can flow out, you're going to be a very unhappy person, because that's what the well is for. What you want to do is you want to cultivate the gifts that come naturally out of that well. Now, that doesn't mean it won't be hard work just because it's natural, because it's a gift that's uniquely yours. You will have to work and to train and to discipline that gift. That part we're not denying. It's not just you're going to be naturally the best at it. You do have to train it and discipline it. But at its source, it's very natural to you. It's just like an athlete. If you're a natural athlete, it doesn't make you a professional athlete, because a professional athlete goes through a rigid, rigorous system of training and learning new skills and applying new skills and constantly facing tougher and tougher opponents. So he's actually training that gift within him. But at the root of it, he's a very natural athlete. It's great to have a natural athlete, but it's not worth anything unless it's disciplined and trained, because it can only go so far if you're that natural athlete. Same thing in terms of the spirit realm. We have that natural gift, but until it's trained, disciplined, used, in other words, given experience in this world, it's never going to improve and widen and deepen and heighten in terms of what it was intended to do for those around us, to be that light for those around us. So what we want to do is we want to cultivate that gift instead of trying to be something we are not gifted to do. And so if we artificially assign male and female gender to certain tasks within the home, we might find ourselves frustrated. For instance, some women, they're really gifted in repair work around the house. Some women they're good plumbers. They might be good carpenters. They might actually be better at it than their husbands. Maybe they worked with their dads in the shop, but they enjoy the building things. They really have an eye for it. Well, in that case, it wouldn't make any sense for a husband maybe to insist on repairing that baseboard that's broken if he doesn't really have the skill or even enjoy it, but his wife does. It doesn't make that a male or a female repair. They can work together. If he wants to learn, she can show him. If he doesn't want to learn, he can rest easy. There's probably something else he's gifted at. He might be more gifted in electronics. There might be things around the house that he's much better at repairing than that baseboard. But that baseboard is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek. So just accept that you don't have to do something just because our culture might deem it male or female. Right? You have to be sensitive to culture, but don't plug up that gift that's in you or plug it up in someone else because of something that's not written in Scripture at all. Scripture is very good at making things reciprocal. Even though it might give a primary responsibility in one area, it's very good at clarifying eventually that a lot of things that we thought might have been male or female, they're actually reciprocal. And we saw that as we went through these foundational scriptures in terms of what husbands are commanded to do. And then what we realized later in Scripture is that the commandment is actually mutual. And you see both genders practicing that commandment. So there's something foundational to think about. In terms of that gift, when you're taking that happy year for your wife, learning what makes her happy, just to recap the 4 easy ones from the last program to maybe save you some time, so that you're actually tapping into the right well, so to speak. You're not trying to cultivate something that's never going to yield for you, and you'll feel like you're beating your head against a wall. When you want to know how to make her happy, remember the statistics show that what women want more than anything is time. Time with their husbands, which goes back to the onah of Exodus 24:10. They want that time. And, you know, how you spend that physical time together can run the range. But it said in the happiest marriages that women had 30 minutes of uninterrupted time with their spouses. And that produces the happiest marriage, no matter how you spend that 30 minutes. Now, obviously, you could have more. You might run a little bit less some days. But having that habit of time together is important. Now, in order to enjoy that time, remember, you want to tap into her will, not your will. Not what makes you happy or what you would consider intimacy, but what makes her happy and what she considers intimacy. And then there's reciprocation. But you take that first step. You take the initiative. Now, for some women, we said what they really want is touches of affection. They might need that hug. They might need to be held. Some women, if you come in at the end of the day, she may just want to sit in your lap, you know, and share an intimate conversation. There's all types of touches of affection that can take place. You know, if you're sitting at supper, maybe you can just reach over and pat her on the hand. But that physical touch for some women really is gasoline for your fire. You know, if you're not trying to put the fire out, instead you want to fuel the fire, then give her those touches of affection, and that will make a difference to her because you're tapping into her unique well. For other women, the touches of affection, they're really not going to produce the same thing as words. Some women are very verbal. And if you will give them words of affirmation or words of gratitude, if you'll notice something they've done around the house, it may be, honey, you did a great job with that baseboard. Once you painted it, I can't even tell that it's been repaired. It looks like the original. Notice when she does something around the house. Give her a word of affirmation. You look beautiful tonight. Wow, I love the way you've got your hair done. You know, she gets her hair cut, maybe notice and compliment. But just words. They enjoy the dialogue more than the touch. And that's going to be their gasoline for their fire. A kind word, and you have no idea how much power that gives you in terms of the relationship. For other women, it's not really touches of affection that fire them up, or it's not really words of affirmation. It's actually they want you to listen. They need to talk, and they need somebody to listen without trying to fix it, because they need to work through it in their own conversation without somebody trying to intervene, because that's not what they're asking you to do. They just want you to listen. And in those cases, that's where you put the uh-huhs and the uh-uhs in the proper places. Maybe ask some pointed questions, but don't feel obligated to fix it. Just be the sounding board. And that's really their fuel. That's what they want. The last thing you might try is helping with a chore, especially if you've got a busy mom around the house. She might be fatigued. She might be tired of having small child conversations. You know, she would like to spend some time with the grown-up, but she's not going to enjoy that time if she can't get the dishes washed, if she can't get the kids busy with their homework, if she can't get the laundry folded. So just your help with a chore might be the gasoline on that fire for her, so that you can enjoy those moments of quality time. So figure out what it is. Figure out what her well is in that happy year. Does she want help with a chore? Does she need a sounding board? Do I need to compliment her? Does she just need my touch today? Figure it out. Figure out what it is that makes her tick, and you're going to be a happy man. Thank you for tuning in to the Creation Gospel on Hebraic Roots Network. If you've been blessed by this program, please consider making a monthly donation to Hebraic Roots Network as part of your monthly giving. You can give a donation at www.hebraicrootsnetwork.com or by calling 1-800-657-9820. Thank you. Welcome back. So the summary of that is, as we're talking about that happy year, learning how to make the other person happy, the thing to remember, husbands, is that your God-given wife, she was formed from your own flesh and bone. She's the other half of you. She's not really separate from you in terms of how you were viewed in heavenly places. When there's a fracture there, then it even hinders your prayers. And what she is in your life to do is to reflect your spiritual condition. That's why it's so important to be equally yoked, so that when you begin to feel that contention and the tension coming from her, and you know she's a godly woman, then you know that there's a red flag waving, that you really need to do some self-examination. If you have a woman who's not godly, then the signals are going to be mixed. They're not going to be that predictable, because some of what she's speaking into you may actually be advice from heaven. I mean, she's still there for your good, or she wouldn't have married you. But on the other hand, her desire is so anchored in the carnal flesh, she might send you some signals that are off, that can be confusing to you. So the point of being equally yoked, you can see why it's emphasized even in the Brit Chadashah, that you want those signals. When you start feeling tension from your wife, you want to be able to say, oh wow, this is important. Let me sit down and figure out what's going on. What is she speaking into? Let me find this Ishmael she's talking about. Because you know it's serious, and you know it's a message from above, not just a message from below. the way to do that, obviously, and to nurture that is to nourish her and cherish her, just like it says in your vows. Nothing's really changed. The vows that you took to begin with, they're still valid. They're still important. And understand that when you supply her needs, ironically, what you're doing is you're supplying your own. It's going to be reciprocated because she's that other part of your body that you don't like to recognize because it's not like you. You say, well, that can't be me. I'm nothing like that. But you are like that. That is the female side of who you are that is going to bring you into balance in your life. It's not good for a man to be alone, but worse yet, it would be even worse for a man to consider himself alone in a marriage, because there's a malfunction there until you recognize her as your other opinion. You say, that's not my other opinion. That's not my opinion at all. But it is. A godly woman, it says, is a gift from heaven. It's a gift from the Father himself to you. And he is allowing you to hear the other side of your opinion to bring you in balance so that you can bear fruit, not just in the physical realm, but in spiritual realms. So let's move on a little bit and maybe talk, I don't know if we'd say we're going to talk about the birds and the bees, but we definitely want to talk about reproduction. We want to look at how this physical world is a picture, a parable maybe, we might say, of the spiritual world, which is going to help us not just predict some of the conflicts that might come up in a marriage, but it might help explain some conflicts that already exist in a marriage. And it's simple, really. It's just a matter of discerning male and female biology, because that physical world, remember, it's a shadow of the spiritual world. What you see on earth is a mirror in some way of a reality that exists in heaven that we've not yet seen, that we've not yet discerned. So understanding that the physical is where we have to look for those clues to the spiritual reality, we look at the male and the female body and we realize in some ways they're very similar. We both have 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth. But the reproductive parts are a little bit different. And they're different so that we can reproduce ourselves. And that's what we want in the spiritual world as well. We want to reproduce ourselves, not just in our own children, but in the children of heaven, the children of Adonai. We want to be able to sow good seed into the earth, just like the seed of the woman. It means that we have an ability to take that seed, which is the word, that's what Yeshua said in his parable, and to sow it into the world so that it will bring forth fruit. Now, the physical picture of that actually is sowing children into the world. And a clue that we have, obviously it goes back to the garden where the promise is given to the seed of the woman to crush the head of the serpent, not the seed of the man. So you can see kind of the resolution in Revelation and how the seed of the woman are prevailing over the seed of the serpent. Because the seed of the woman, the virtuous woman, are those who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Yeshua. That's the seed that can crush the head of the serpent or the dragon. But on the other hand, there are children of the dragon. In fact, Yeshua and John the Baptist, they both had people that they call vipers and sons of vipers because of the words that they were sowing into the world, the improper twisting of the Torah itself. So if we look at the male and the female in terms of how we're created, it will give us some clues as to how we can produce some good fruit, whether we are male or female, in the earth. And if we understand how the other is wired, so to speak, it's going to help us understand that other person and why they behave the way that they do, and why they say the things that they do. Because often, as we said in previous programs, what we perceive as competition or the other person trying to dominate us or to win or whatever, that's not really their motivation at all. It's a matter of being wired differently and perceiving a situation differently and seeing the end of that situation differently. So a man is created with a need to give his energy. He's born a giver. And literally, if you look at the way that he's made, there are millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of opportunities for the male to sow seed, to create new life, or at least he can't create the life, but he can plant the seed that can bring forth new life. Within the body itself is that great potential, and it's pretty much there even up until the end of his life, even into old age. The male has the potential to sow millions and millions and millions of seeds in the physical realm. The female, however, is the opposite. Whereas it seems like his possibilities are almost limitless, hers is very finite. There is an exact number when that female child is born, an exact number of eggs that are contained within her body, and she will never produce more. And as she ages, her opportunity statistically is decreasing to bring forth that life into the earth because of the limits that are placed upon her reproductive system. So she has finite opportunities to create a new life. So her specialty, when they come together, when he sows seed, because sometimes she sows seed. That's the irony of the Torah portion Tazriah, because it literally means when she sows seed. There's some mysteries, there's some secrets in that Torah portion in terms of the number of days of cleansing for a male child versus a female child. It's interesting, which when we get into the Torah portions, we'll cover that in a little more depth. And we covered a little bit, I believe, in the Scarlet Harlot and the Crimson Thread in that series. But when she sows seed, so she also sows seed, even though we don't think of the woman as having seed. That seed is the word that she puts into her children. That seed is what is going to crush the head of the serpent. Anyway, we're not going to chase that rabbit trail. Let's go back. When she sows her seed, it's finite. Now, when they come together and he sows seed, typically only one egg is going to be fertilized. And in that process of fertilization, her body is extremely picky. Out of all the millions who might start that journey, typically only one will she accept to complete that journey. Sometimes you might have twins or triplets, but normally, statistically, what's going to happen is out of the millions of possibilities that he offers her, she picks one. Now, that's pretty picky in terms of what is being selected to be carried to the next step of the process. And it's a long process, and it's a dangerous process, both for the egg that's being fertilized and about to form into a child. You know what? It's dangerous for the mother herself. In centuries past, it was, a very dangerous job to bring children into the world. So even engaging in that act of procreation brings the life of the mother and the potential child in danger. It's a process we tend to take for granted, but a lot of times, a lot of those fertilized seeds are actually just spontaneously aborted by her body, and she never knows that she was pregnant because it happens so soon in the process. So not only does she reject the millions and select one, even after fertilization, she frequently will reject that initial stage. And she will move on, and the process starts over. So when we think of women as maybe being picky, pick, right? Well, that's the way that she's made. It's part of her essence. She was created to be selective. She was created to select one thing and finish it. Whereas men were made to supply the potential for millions of things. But the understanding is when they come together, out of all these things that he offers her, she's going to choose one that's good. Her body is going to make a choice and say, this seed is viable. This is the seed that I want to develop. And that selection process continues throughout her pregnancy. At any point in the pregnancy, it's not as though she has control over it, unless it's some exterior event, such as an accident that affects her body. Just in a normal pregnancy, she will continue to make those decisions that she has no control over. Basically, it's her body making these decisions. It's outside of her control. And that body will keep making decisions, because at any point in there, she may lose that child. Her body may reject that seed. It may reject that combination of seed and egg. And so, understanding that, you can see, if we're that different in how we are prepared for procreation, think of how different we're going to be in our relationship to one another, in terms of the things that we do together that are going to create fruit within our marriage, within our family. We're going to have very different ideas about how to accomplish the best good. Extremely different ideas. Men are going to specialize in coming up with lots of ideas. They're going to want to do lots of different things. But the female is wired to say, let's pick one that we actually have the chance of finishing. He may have any number of projects he wants to start, but her tendency will be to say, okay, I see you've got these 5 projects out on the table, or you've got these 5 ideas, or you've had 5 ideas in the last 5 weeks as to how to accomplish this. Let's pick one good idea. Let's pick the best idea you have. And let's put all our resources into that. The same way she does with that fertilized seed. When they come together, she says, okay, for the next 9 months, I'm going to take this one thing and I'm going to pour all my resources into this one thing. Once I've made the selection and once I've said, this is it, this is the child, then everything in her body is going to be aimed toward making that a viable seed to be sown into the world, making that into a viable child to be born in the world. And so the question her body is asking, number one, are you viable? Are you worth my time? Can I bring you to completion? Will you be good when I'm done working on you? Her body is making those choices. And if so, then I'm going to devote the next 9 months of my life. I'm going to endure swollen feet. I'm going to endure morning sickness. I'm going to endure back pain. I'm going to endure feeling fat. I'm going to endure the pain of childbirth. I'm going to endure all these discomforts if I know you're viable. If I know I can bring you to completion, if I can finish you. Which the irony of that is, once you sow the child into the world, it's only just begun. You're actually re-beginning the process. But even to bring that child into the world is going to require every resource her body can pour into it. So you can see the difference in that as to how a husband and a wife might have difficulty in moving forward in terms of their budget, in terms of their job choices, in terms of where they live, what kind of home they live in, what kind of car they drive, where they send the kids to school, whether they homeschool. There's any number of choices out there. And the female aspect of that is, which of these is going to be the best in the long term? She will tend to look toward the future. When you look at the prophetesses of Scripture, Scripture is very careful to point out that there are prophetesses, and they specialized in looking beyond the here and now. Just like Sarah, the here and now reality of their lives was that Abraham loved Ishmael very, very much. But prophetically, looking into their future, what she realized is that Ishmael continuing to live in that house was going to sabotage the promise. In the long run, Ishmael would not be a viable son for them in terms of carrying forward that covenant. It was going to be Isaac who would be the viable son. And so she rejects Ishmael. Abraham's a lot more reluctant because he's very much attached to Ishmael in the here and the now, and he's having difficulty seeing how much trouble that's going to be to him in the future. That's the ability, the gift of the female. Now, does that mean men don't prophesy, that they're not prophets, that they don't see the future? No, it doesn't mean that. We're talking about types. But this is a unique ability associated with the female that in the process of selecting the seed, nurturing the seed, and bringing that seed to a state of viability where it can be born in the earth, that's her specialty. And that physical ability, it carries on into the marriage relationship. In fact, into other relationships as well. She will tend to look for that which is the most viable. She will not necessarily look for a new project, especially if she's still working on the old one. You know, and that's where you might come into conflict sometimes. Because the difficulty for the male is he's going to have trouble confining that power of creation. It's because he's wired with all those millions of possibilities. Historically, he's tended to be less faithful to a covenant marriage. Now, it seems like in this generation, everything's flipping upside down. I think I don't know if we can fall any lower in terms of our ethics and morals and so forth. But in times past, it's been the male who has more difficulty mastering that natural desire to sow seed. And which I think that's why we're given these commandments that we've been covering in this series, so that he can recognize and work on the spiritual aspect. And as he dives down there and starts working on the spiritual aspect of these commandments, not just the physical, it will open his eyes. That's why he needs the spirit of da'at. Remember, dalet, ayin, tav? The ayin is the eyes. He needs spiritual eyes to see, the goodness and the necessity for faithfulness within his covenant marriage, because without that, it's going to be difficult for his wife to bring those good things to his name and his house that he wants. But he's going to have to master that desire. And that typifies that what we would call the male characteristic is he wants to try new things. And he'll want to try those new things sometimes when they're even outside of his ability to really bring it to a state of success. He believes he can do it. He sees, oh wow, this is a new thing. And men like shiny new things. There's an old saying, the only difference between men and boys is the price and size of their toys. It might be a toy tractor, it might be a real tractor. But they're constantly looking for those opportunities. Well, I need this tractor. I need this new tractor. I can make it pay off. Well, because he wants the new tractor, he wants to try the new thing, he may not truly take into account the cost of the tractor, the potential return of the tractor, and see that those two things don't really add up. That it's actually going to be a greater burden than it's going to be a help. And that's where those two minds can come together, because on that female side, the advice that will come in is say, okay, let's look at the numbers here and see long term whether this is a good decision. Because will you drive this tractor one season and then it will rest in the barn? That might be the question. She kind of knows her husband and she knows his habits. And so she knows he might change hobbies, or he might change frequently the money-making schemes that he comes up with. That's part of who he is, because remember, it's his obligation to put the food on the table. Even though we can see that the wife also puts food on the table in Proverbs 31, and we can also see that in other places, like, say, Lydia, who was the seller of purple. It's his primary obligation to put that food on the table, and therefore it's going to be very natural for him to want to buy that new tractor, to start that new business. Well, let me buy this tool. I can do this job myself, and it'll save us so much money. Well, it's only going to save you money if you actually intend to follow through and do that remodeling with that tool. The wife knows his habits, and she knows his limitations. She knows their limitations together as a couple, and she's very likely to be putting on the brakes on these purchases. I know with my dad, he was constantly buying new musical instruments. It seemed like you would come home from school and there'd be a new guitar, a new amplifier, a new fiddle. There was always some new instrument that he needed what he had just wasn't the right thing. And he and my mom disagreed constantly over those purchases, because she's looking at things more practical, like rent, gasoline, and so forth. And so the compromise there is, hey, you need to choose, and you need to commit to this period for this choice, because we can't afford for you to change your mind until this time. These are the expenses. This is what's coming in, right? When this exceeds this, then we're in debt, then we're in trouble, all right? I understand you like to try new things and start new things, and I know you see the money-making potential in all of them, but let's pick one or two of the most viable, most likely to succeed ideas that you have, and let's build those. Because remember, she's very picky, so she's going to be good at helping him sort through all these wonderful ideas and pick the ones that actually have a chance of success. The difficulty is going to be when he thinks that she is limiting him. And the truth is, she is. That's her job. It's his job to come up with all this potential. It's hardwired into him. But in a spirit-filled family, he will present these ideas to her for her cooperation, for her validation, for her advice, for her counsel, because what she wants to do is not to squash every idea. What she wants to do is to help him select those that they can bring to fruition. Just like her body, if I'm going to spend 9 months growing this child, I want it to be a viable child. I don't want a stillborn child. I want a return on this investment of just sucking all the resources out of my body for 9 months. Well, it's the same thing in the marriage. When we make these decisions, we want to make the most viable decisions that we can that are going to make it worth all the effort and pain and sorrow and suffering that we're going to have to put into bringing it to its birth in terms of the reality. And right there is where a lot of marriage arguments start. We misunderstand the goal of our spouse. You're trying to confine me. You're trying to limit me. You're trying to spend everything we have. We'll look a little more in depth at this problem in the next program, but I hope that gives you a little bit of insight for right now. See you next time.